You've been walking for days. Your body aches. You're dripping with sweat from the heat of the sun bearing down overhead. And yet you're wrapped up in layers upon layers of clothing. Even your face is covered. And you're wearing thick black goggles so that not a single centimeter of your body is exposed. Your journey has been long, and you feel like you might die from exhaustion or from overheating due to these multiple layers of clothes. But dying is better than being exposed. You saw it happen when your entire team changed. The light cannot be trusted, not even for a fraction of a second. It's been like this for years. You've learned and survived through painful experience. Many of those you used to know cannot say the same. You've been alone for so long. You might have given up all hope if it wasn't for the distress signal coming from a nearby SCP Foundation containment facility, Site 46. Any kind of survivors would be better than nothing, no matter what kind of sorry shape they were in, as long as they were still human. You find your way to an opening in the side of a mountain and slide into the cave, hoping you weren't spotted. The whole world is crawling with those things now. You can't let yourself be seen. As you trudge down the cave towards the entrance, you see what looks like a huge black snail trail splattered on the ground, leading into the facility. You try to avoid it and press on. You don't even need a key card to enter. The door has been left ajar. The facility reeks of those things, but you can't see any of them. You just hope they've moved on and left some human survivors in their wake. The place looks abandoned. Every step you take echoes through the empty halls. When you find that the elevator's out, you take the stairs all the way down to level B5, Keter Containment. Lucky for you, it seems all the cells are empty now. The horrors that were kept inside of them have all long since flown the coop. You keep following that slimy black trail until you find an abandoned office. There are no people here anymore. Just a broken barricade, some empty medicine bottles, and a bucket that the people inside the office had apparently been using as a toilet. You breathe a sigh of disappointment at finding no one alive here, but you're at least relieved to be out of the sun. You can finally remove your jacket and head wrap. With your uncovered eyes, you notice that a nearby computer terminal is still powered up. You sit down at the desk and turn on the monitor. Because of the emergency procedures put into place in a K-class scenario like this, safeguards no longer apply. You can access all the information you need, up to and including finding out what actually happened. In the dull glow of a nearby emergency light, you see a dark shape slumping through the halls in shadow. You tense up, then exhale as it slithers off into an adjoining hall. You're safe, for now. The terminal has finally loaded and authenticated your access. You're staring at the file for SD Lock's proposal for SCP-001 when day breaks. It's the only name you can give the apocalypse your world is currently experiencing. This is one of the only anomalies in the entire history of the SCP Foundation to be given the Apollyon Containment class, meaning containment is truly impossible. SCP-001 is the most dangerous enemy that the Foundation and planet Earth has ever faced. It's always been the principle of the SCP Foundation to battle in the dark so that the civilian world can thrive in the light. But now the light has become the enemy. Anyone exposed to any amount of sunlight for even the briefest period of time is subjected to the effects of SCP-001, and those effects are beyond horrifying. The SCP Foundation Administrator released an urgent memo telling Foundation personnel to make their way to Site-19 at all costs, because they need all the help they can get. Those exposed to SCP-001 in the process are no longer considered human. Their new designation is SCP-001-A. These new entities are to be avoided at all costs. But in case of emergencies, the administrator says it is permitted to cut off parts of your transformed comrades and eat them to avoid starvation. No attempt should be made to kill them, since you won't succeed. You'll just put yourself at risk. When the sun changed and became SCP-001, it instantly affected 6.8 billion innocent people. The second the visible light touched them, whether it was from the sun itself or even reflected off the moon, their bodies liquefied, melting like candle wax into puddles of living gelatinous slime.
This is how fast YouTube is with Brave. Notice how there's no pre-roll ads? And here's how you...
This effect isn't isolated to humans either. Any biological entity exposed to sunlight immediately underwent the same irreversible melting process into SCP-001-A, and the horror had only just begun. People transformed into SCP-001-A will remain shades of their former intelligence and personality. They may even try to will their new gooey mass into a shape resembling their original form. However, these individuals will lose their sense of self if they come into contact with other instances of SCP-001-A. When they come together, 001-A instances will bond on a molecular level, wading up into horrific giant blobs with only one purpose: integrating more matter into their bodies. That's why they have to be avoided at all costs. You continue to search the computer terminal for answers. Perhaps there was some kind of contingency plan put in place for this, some way to reverse the effects, or at least escape the nightmare Earth has become. Instead, you find a series of attachments linked to the SCP-001 file, detailing what seems to be the last days of the people who barricaded themselves in the facility. Most prominent among these were researcher Dr. Logan Igata, her partner Ari, a security officer named Commander Anad, and a few others. Dr. Igata had locked herself in the office, where she recorded her final messages to the world. In the first audio log, Dr. Igata and her companions seemed afraid, but hopeful that there may be some way out of this situation. Dr. Igata reported that most of the workers at the facility were transformed during the initial event. Their melted bodies had fused outside the facility, and now they were trying to bust their way back in. The defenses had held so far though, and they seemed confident they would hold long enough for them to figure out a way to escape this awful situation. You open the second attachment, an incident report, and realize things may not have been as hopeful as Dr. Igata let on. She reported hearing the huge mass of melted creatures hammering on the door outside again, begging for them to come out and experience the sun with them. They wanted desperately to add to their ever-growing biomass. In order to experiment with what exactly would happen, they sent out one of their few remaining D-classes wearing a full protective suit. He didn't last long. The huge creature grabbed him with tentacles made of reconstituted flesh. It began ripping off his protective suit as he screamed for mercy. It was a monster made of dozens of people and animals. He could never overpower it. The second the sun touched his skin, he melted away and was absorbed by the great mass holding him in place. Guns were ineffective against these SCP-001-A super entities. Fire would do no good. It seemed that extremely low temperatures were the only way to slow the immense blobs down. And even then, not permanently. There was one ray of light in the darkness. The site director had a secret tunnel underneath his office, connected to a tram that could hopefully take them directly to Site-19 without risk of SCP-001 exposure. It was a good plan, and by far the best option they had available to them. But the best plans often don't work in practice. You open the next attachment on the terminal. This time, it's a video feed. You can actually see Dr. Logan Igata, and she looks harrowed by what she's experienced. As it turns out, while the others, including her partner Ari, attempted to escape through the tunnel, something had happened. Dr. Igata heard Ari's voice over her radio, but there was something wrong with it. It was too low, too guttural, and filled with gurgles. SCP-001 had gotten her. She was changed. The monster from above had crawled in through the ceiling. It had taken them, all of them, and converted them into something less than human. Any hope of escape now seemed gone. Ari told Dr. Igata that it would be fine, that it was such a bright, beautiful, sunny day outside, and she was wasting it locked up inside that office. She tormented Dr. Igata with their shared memories of picnics in the park on sunny days in the past. The monster with Ari's voice did everything it could to try to convince Dr. Igata to give up and join them. but she wasn't ready to go just yet. You look away from the screen when you hear a sound in the corner. You see a dark puddle of some unknown substance, and then some skeletal hands rising out of it. The hands are pulling themselves out of the puddle, followed by a skeletal face covered in matted hair. You have to stop yourself from screaming, until a flash from a nearby security light makes the figure disappear. It's a normal puddle once again. Your mind is playing tricks on you. You open the next attachment, another video, and see that Dr. Igata's condition has deteriorated. She looked pale, frantic, and thin. She was using a knife to draw her own blood onto a piece of blood-stained parchment covered in strange symbols. Igata ranted about her theory. What if 001 took the minds and bodies of its victims, but not their souls? Through performing some kind of arcane blood ritual, she hoped to at least rescue and keep the soul of Ari, even if her mind and body were lost. You open the next attachment. It seemed that Agata's ritual worked, but not in the way she hoped. The twisted soul of Ari, driven mad by SCP-001, had taken over the file. It begins corrupting the text of the SCP-001 file into crazy ranting about how futile it is to fight. It then cuts to an even more frightening video feed. Dr. Igata, in her sleep, tossing and turning in a makeshift bed in the corner of her office. The camera approaches her, in first person, and lingers over her sleeping body. An oily skeletal hand reaches past the camera and runs its fingers through Dr. Igata's hair. It's that exact same hand you saw reaching out of that black puddle earlier. You must have seen Ari's lingering spirit. With a lump in your throat, you open the next attachment and watch the video. You see Dr. Igata, now truly broken. She'd been haunted by Ari's demonic spirit for a long time now, and it has clearly taken its toll. She is waving around a handgun while she speaks. She now believes there is only one way to escape, but not like this. She doesn't want the gun to draw attention to her body. She doesn't want to become part of that mass, even if she is dead. She opens a drawer on her desk she's recording at and places the gun inside. Dr. Igata then apologizes to her loved ones who are likely long since dead or assimilated and turns off the recording for the last time. In that moment, you realize there's a single drawer in the desk in front of you. When you reach forward and open it, you see the same handgun Dr. Igata was holding is laying inside. You pick it up and study it, weighing your options. Perhaps there truly is no other way out. Then you see an update on the file. One more attachment has been added while you were studying the gun. You feel your heart pounding in your chest as you reach forward and open the attachment. The text has been changed entirely. The file on SCP-001 is now a poem, an ode to the sun and to ultimate togetherness. Then a video file spontaneously opens itself on the screen. It's a video of you, shot from behind. You see those oily skeletal hands reaching for you in the dark, just like they did with Dr. Igata. In that moment, you panic and fire the gun behind you, hoping to scare off the spirit. Instead, the sound of the gunshots attracts something far worse. The immense blob of screaming, melted flesh charges towards the office. You try to barricade the door, but it is not enough. The flesh seeps and bursts through and grabs you in its meaty tentacles. You scream and try to escape, but it won't save you. Nothing will save you. The flesh carries you upstairs, out through the empty halls, out into the cave. You can see the light in the distance as the blob ferries you towards it. You won't be alone for much longer. In fact, you won't be alone ever again. Now check out SCP-001, the Scarlet King, and SCP-001, which is the real 001, for more deep dives into SCP-001 mysteries.
Good day everyone and welcome to When Day Breaks. This time, the good doctor is here, SCP-049, but he won't be recommending fresh air and exercise. As with everything relating to the When Day Breaks event, it's best to just stay inside. And while the rest of the world turns into human sludge, you can browse the entire internet, but to see every possible film, show and stay protected from any hackers safe in their sunproof basements, you're gonna need Atlas VPN for that. Atlas VPN is a data encryption tool that hides and replaces your virtual location on the internet. With this tool, you can choose where you want your location to show as. Geo restrictions prevent you from streaming certain films in certain and does not grant you full anonymity on. Chief Engineer Murphy O'Neill of Site 54 cautiously stepped backwards, firing round after round into a crowd of humanoid creations lumbering their way towards him. A couple went down, but the rest barely seemed to notice.
The door! Open it now!
Murphy turned and shouted at his companions before returning back to firing. The SCP-131 twins frantically cooed at each other as they attempted to override the door security. 131A barged through his sibling and entered the override code that the other was too careless to get right the first time. As the door lifted, Murphy slung his rifle to his side and pushed the trolley carrying the twins through the door. He slammed a fist against the emergency lockdown system, sealing the door for good. He dropped to his knees and breathed hard, before giving the twins a stern look.
What happened back there, guys?
The 131 items began chirping frantically, but Murphy held up a hand.
Never mind. I'm sorry I asked, jeez.
Murphy stood up and began pushing the trolley down the corridor. This trolley was one of his greatest creations in his opinion. When things all went to pot and all the dangerous things got loose, SCP-131 actively tried to help people. He had rewarded them by building them their own method of locomotion and interaction. An interface tracked their eye movements. They could use this interface to wirelessly interact with site systems. They could even communicate with Murphy through a module built into his mechanical left arm. They were named Oscar and Yasmin, and they were his only friends. Murphy slung his bag off his shoulder and dropped it on the trolley, revealing a number of mechanical parts and electrical circuits. The twins came over to investigate. Oscar began chirping, and Murphy heard the words relayed from the trolley to his arm module.
Are these the parts? They are. They ought to fix the busted transmitter.
Yasmin chimed in.
Do you think anyone will hear us this time?
I hope so.
Their home was quite an extravagance. He had taken up residence within the site director's office. Sofas, a TV, a private bathroom, and even sleeping accommodation. The windows were all blacked out. The twins disembarked the trolley and raced over to a small indoor jungle gym Murphy had built for them. Murphy fired up the kettle as he pulled a pot noodle from his stash. Not the most nutritious meal, but it had been a tough day. He needed something easy. He set himself down at the computer with his noodles while the twins played a game of tag. The CCTV didn't show anything of real consequence. Empty halls, except for a few hordes of 049 creations in the lower levels. Site 54 was isolated in the desert and relied on solar energy. Unfortunately, the generators failed when the sun went weird. The system fused, the security went down, and all the SCPs got loose. The staff took refuge in the lower levels, while the SCPs got turned to mush in the sunlight. Murphy volunteered to go and fix the system, but unknown to them all, SCP-049 had been down there with them the entire time. He quietly converted survivors into his own creations, and before long, Murphy was the only one left. Murphy turned off the display, drained the last of his noodles, and sat down at the sofa.
You two, come here.
The twins produced a slightly sad tone as they reluctantly left the play area and joined Murphy.
Look, I understand there is a lot of pressure on you both in the heat of it, but we can't afford slip-ups like that. Thankfully for you, Yasmin, Oscar took the initiative and got that door open. Otherwise I'd be a zombie by now, and you would both be... well, I don't know what he would have done with you two.
The twins looked down and produced another sad tone. Murphy felt his wrist vibrate again.
We're sorry.
Alright, now, why don't you go and find us a movie?
Yasmin gave a very excited squeal and made a beeline straight for a DVD of Moana sat beneath the TV.
Again? We watched that one yesterday. And the day before.
Oscar joined in and also began offering Murphy excited tones. Defeated, Murphy set the film to play and left the twins to watch it while he went instead to get some sleep. The scorched desert winds hammered Murphy's biosuit as he tightened the last few bolts on the transmitter. While the sunlight was harsh, actual 001 flesh entities were very rare to see out here. A blessing that this site was built in such a remote place. He was on the roof and a glance out across the sandy dunes provided both the assurance of no flesh activity, but also reminded him that once the supplies ran out, he was screwed.
Anything!
He called out to the twins, who were at the bottom of the maintenance ladder monitoring a display on the wall.
Transmitter operational. The only signal being received is the repeat from Site 19. Nothing else.
Murphy sighed and slumped against the transmitter. Nothing. Not even a whisper from anyone else out there. He packed up his tools and began descending the ladder. A sudden bang rocked the facility, and he fell the last few rungs, landing awkwardly with a yelp, twisting his ankle. The twins rushed over to see how he was, but he ushered them away as he quickly began checking the monitor for CCTV and system diagnostics.
The lower levels have been breached.
Multiple large-scale biomasses detected.
The flesh?
No external breaches detected, or any 001 indications.
049's been making something, it seems.
Biomass ascending to level 3.
Shit! Don't let them get to level 2. Activate the Tesla gates while I get the CCTV up for that level.
Biomass ascending to level 2. Tesla gates online. Biomass contained.
The monitor fired up with a CCTV display, and the twins came over to view the horror. Standing at nearly 7 feet tall was this monolithic creature. Several of them, in fact. Humans with hulking frames and contorted faces. Their skin was all torn and stretched and frayed, unable to hold in the muscle bulging out from the body. Their faces conveyed nothing but rage and animalistic expressions. One of the creatures showed severe burns to its face and body. Murphy figured that one had run into the Tesla gate.
Oh, we need to get back home. Oscar, can you monitor the system remotely?
Oscar gave an acknowledging tone, and Murphy began pushing them down the corridors with haste.
Ring the rosies, a pocket full of posies, a tissue, we all fall down.
The lights went out.
Oscar?
Power cut in the lower levels. Fault detected in the main circuit.
A few seconds later, and the corridors were awash in the emergency red lights. Murphy began running through the corridors as fast as his throbbing ankle would allow.
Insufficient power. Tesla gates disabled. Biomass ascending to level 1.
Fuck! Where are they?
Murphy screeched to a halt as a horde of his former colleagues came around the corner ahead of him. He shouldered his rifle and began firing into the group. The trolley immediately did a 180 turn and began heading down another corridor. The sound of thunderous crashes echoed all around them. Those things were getting closer. As the twins went round another corner, a piercing screech came from them both. Murphy went round after them and came face to face with SCP-049.
There you are. Stop resisting. I'm here to cure you.
Murphy instantly ducked under the arm and thrust the butt of his rifle into 049's side, sending him falling to the floor in a cry of pain. Murphy raised the muzzle and fired 2 shots into the back of 049's head, sending pieces of mask, skull, and splashes of blood across the wall behind him. The robed man fell to the floor, coughing up pieces of his own jaw.
Proximity alert!
Murphy had no time to react as a colossal fist came through the wall. Murphy felt something hit his chest, the sound of smashing glass filled his ears, and the sight of the quickly approaching entrance hall floor filled his vision as he plummeted towards it. Murphy opened his eyes and felt a jolt of pain coming from his chest with each breath. He had definitely cracked a couple of ribs in the fall. Across from him, Yasmin was screaming mournful tones as they circled the remains of Oscar, who had been crushed by debris. He regained his footing and approached Yasmin, who was still screaming. They began quickly looking from Murphy to Oscar, as if indicating for Murphy to do something.
I'm so sorry, little one.
Yasmin looked straight at him and began making more aggressive tones. Even with the trolley gone, Murphy could tell Yasmin was in terrible pain.
I can't fix him. I'm sorry.
The wall in front of them suddenly crumbled as the creatures came trampling in, followed by a horde of people he once knew. Yasmin cowered behind Murphy as they both backed up against the entrance gate behind them. The creatures cornered them both in a semicircle and then just stopped. They just stared at them both. A sudden raspier, echoing breath took precedence as SCP-049 limped into view and approached Murphy. He was a mess. Blood and gore adorned the front of his robes. Absent an eye and most of his face, Murphy's earlier shots had inflicted considerable damage. Yasmin rushed forward and stood between Murphy and SCP-049, defiantly shouting at him. SCP-049 kicked Yasmin across the room, where one of the large creatures rose his foot and crushed Yasmin under it. Murphy screamed and ran at SCP-049 in anger and went to strike him. SCP-049, however, simply moved aside and kicked Murphy in his already hurting ankle and sent him sprawling to the ground. He then stood over him, dripping blood still. There was only one hope left. Murphy reached into his biosuit trouser leg pocket and pulled out an emergency flare.
Your bullets did not stop me. You think that will?
No. But I know something that will.
Murphy said, before aiming the flare and firing it up towards the ceiling. The fire suppression system immediately activated. An alarm began blaring, water poured down from the ceiling, and the entrance gate began to open. Sunlight poured into the room. SCP-049 roared as his creations began melting before his eyes, turning into flesh. Months of work and refinement gone in seconds. He turned back to Murphy, who was already limping away towards another corridor. He made to follow him, but a fleshy appendage grabbed him by the leg. The gate continued to descend, bathing more of the room in sunlight. He backed away and pressed himself against the wall. Murphy turned to see SCP-049 give him a look of anger and fear as he closed the door, leaving the doctor to the mercy of the flesh.